He told her once, "No one will ever believe you." And for years, Sarah Mitchell carried that sentence like a curse. Her father's words hung in the air every time she thought about telling the truth, every time she thought about running, every time she tried to imagine a life beyond the walls of his control. For years, she thought he was right, but monsters leave shadows, and sometimes those shadows stretch farther than we ever imagined. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a survivor who broke free from her father's abuse, a woman who rebuilt her life from ashes, and the shocking discovery that her father's violence may not have started or ended with her. Sarah was born in 1989 in a modest house at the edge of Polk County, Missouri. To the outside world, her family seemed ordinary. Her mother, Linda, worked at the library. Her father, David, worked construction jobs that kept food on the table. They attended church, waved to neighbors, and went to Sunday barbecues. From a distance, they looked like any other American family trying to get by. But inside the home, shadows grew. David Mitchell wasn't just strict, he was controlling. When Sarah was 7, she remembered wanting to wear her favorite red dress to school. Her father told her no, saying, "That's not what good girls wear." By the time she was 10, she wasn't allowed to choose her own clothes. By 12, she wasn't allowed to have friends over. By 14, she wasn't allowed to leave the house unless he approved it. Neighbors noticed his temper, though few ever spoke about it. One recalled years later, "I heard him yelling in the yard, not just angry, furious, like the kind of rage that makes the hairs on your arms stand up." Sarah was always quiet after that. Control turned to fear. Fear turned to violence, and violence became Sarah's childhood. By 16, she no longer thought of herself as a daughter. She thought of herself as property. She learned to measure every movement, every word, every glance, in case it might set him off. Her mother, Linda, tried to soften the blows, but she too was trapped. Sarah once described her mother as a woman trying to survive a fire while carrying a child in her arms. Linda would later admit she lived in constant fear. Fear that leaving would mean worse violence. Fear that staying would mean slow destruction. One night in 2007, the violence escalated beyond anything Sarah had endured before. She tried to call a friend from the landline. Her father caught her mid-dial. He ripped the phone from the wall and screamed, "No one will believe you." Not the police, not your friends, not your mother. No one. Sarah remembered standing frozen, her hands shaking, her throat closing. For the first time, she realized he meant every word. She kept silent for years until she couldn't anymore. It was January 2012 when Sarah finally broke. She was 23 years old, and the walls of the house had become a cage she could no longer survive. That night, after another violent outburst, she ran. Barefoot, clutching only her coat, she burst through the back door into the freezing air. A neighbor later recounted what they heard. On the police transcript, the call plays back in clipped breaths. 911, what's your emergency? There's a young woman pounding on my door. She's terrified. She says her dad is going to kill her. Please, send someone. Officers arrived within minutes. They found Sarah trembling, her face bruised, her voice raw from crying. She told them everything. Years of abuse, years of fear, years of silence broken in one desperate night. David Mitchell was arrested the next morning. In court, Sarah testified against him. She stood before a room of strangers and spoke words that felt like knives in her throat. She remembered every detail, the control, the threats, the violence. Jurors watched her tremble but never falter. Prosecutors presented her diary entries, photographs of injuries, testimony from neighbors who had heard arguments through the walls. One juror later said, "You could see the truth in her eyes. You could feel it." In 2013, David Mitchell was convicted of multiple counts of assault and abuse. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. For Sarah, the verdict was both a relief and a hollow victory. "I thought once he was in prison, it was over. I thought I could finally breathe. But I was wrong." Sarah rebuilt her life piece by piece. She went to therapy. She started volunteering with organizations for domestic violence survivors. Eventually, she founded her own nonprofit Break Free Foundation, a group dedicated to helping women escape abusive homes. Her story, once buried, became her power. She traveled, gave speeches, spoke to lawmakers. Each time she reminded herself that she had taken the one thing her father never wanted her to have, her voice. For nearly a decade, she lived as best she could. She married, had a child, and tried to leave her father's shadow behind. But shadows have a way of stretching. In January 2023, Polk County Sheriff's Office announced they were reopening a cold case. The name was familiar to many: Jessica Harper, a 23-year-old waitress who had vanished in June 1995. Jessica was last seen leaving her shift at a local diner. She told her co-workers she was heading home. She never arrived. The next morning, her car was found abandoned on a rural road. Inside were her purse, her keys, and an uneaten takeout box from the diner. The case had haunted the community for decades. Rumors spread of a stalker, a jealous ex-boyfriend, a stranger passing through town. But no suspect was ever named. This time, detectives had new tools. Forensic technology had advanced since the 1990s. Evidence once too degraded could now be tested again. Among the items preserved from Jessica's car was a scrap of fabric. Analysts extracted a partial DNA profile. It wasn't Jessica's. It matched David Mitchell. Detective Harris recalled, "It was the break we'd been waiting for." Suddenly, Sarah's story wasn't just about a father who terrorized his daughter. It was about a man who may have claimed other victims long before. Sarah was devastated when detectives told her. It was like finding out the nightmare didn't start with me. That maybe I was just one stop along his path. Her advocacy, once about survival, now carried the weight of potential murder. Was her father just an abuser, or was he a predator who had walked free for decades? Jessica's family felt the shock in waves. Her sister Amy said, "We always thought it had to be someone local, someone who knew the roads. To hear David Mitchell's name, it was like learning the ghost had been living next door all along." Investigators pressed deeper. They reviewed David's employment records. In 1995, he had been working construction less than 3 miles from the diner where Jessica waited tables. Witnesses from that time described seeing a man matching his description near her car. Then came the most chilling discovery. In April 2023, cadaver dogs searched a wooded property where David had worked as a contractor that same summer. Hours into the search, the dogs alerted near a shallow depression. Excavation revealed scraps of fabric, rusted buttons from a waitress uniform, and bone fragments. Forensic testing confirmed what Jessica's family had feared for nearly 30 years. The remains belonged to Jessica Harper. The evidence pointed straight at David Mitchell. His DNA was in her car. He had worked near her last known location. Her remains were found on property he once had access to. The timeline was damning. The connections, undeniable. Detectives prepared charges. Prosecutors assembled files. Jessica's family braced for long-delayed justice. But then, just as the case seemed ready to close, something arrived at the sheriff's office that changed everything. An anonymous letter. It claimed David Mitchell was not the man who had made Jessica disappear. It described details investigators had never released to the public, and it ended with one chilling line. "You are chasing the wrong monster." Sarah's story was already one of survival and courage, but with Jessica Harper's cold case now entwined, the line between truth and lies had never been thinner. What do you believe? Was David Mitchell a predator hiding in plain sight, guilty of far more than anyone imagined? Or is someone else still responsible for Jessica's disappearance? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because in the next chapter, we'll dive into the anonymous letters, the shocking new suspects, and a confession that will leave you questioning everything.